Welcome to Artistic Adventures. This is part 6 in our Snow White doll project, and we're going to complete the dress in this video. So let's get started. When we left last time, we had the bodice completed, and we had sewn the gold trim around the top, the bottom, and 2 rows down the front. Now the first thing I'm going to do is apply the Velcro to the back, and I'm doing that with glue, so I want to let that dry while we're working on the rest of the top. So I'm just using my E6000 and putting the strips of Velcro down on the 2 flaps. One will fold over the other, and that will be the closure for the back of the bodice. All right, so we're going to let that dry. Then I just want to show you, I sketched out how I want to do the gold trim on the front. I'm going to use some swirl patterns, and it's going to be in 3 different pieces. That's 1 piece, 2, and then 3. So these will sort of back up to that center gold stripes that we have in the middle of the bodice. All right, and I've already cut out my little sections and glued the ends of them so that they won't unravel. And we're going to start with this first piece. We're going to glue down the end of it, and we're going to glue it straight up like this so that when we twirl it around, it'll have a nice curve to it. And I'm doing this also with E6000 because it dries really fast and it's a really strong glue. And to hold the pieces down while I'm doing it, I'm going to just use some pins and pin that pin them down because I want to make sure I get them in a symmetrical positions, and then it will hold it down while it dries. I started this video on Monday, and I did a little bit each night because I had to do so much glue drying that it took a lot of time. So I would do a little bit of pieces and then come back. So I'm just using my pointed tool here to put a little dab of glue underneath the ends of those gold braids and then sticking it down, trying not to let any show on the blue fabric. I wanted to make it look like this was sort of embroidered onto the top. So I let those dry for a while, and usually about 30 minutes, and it's good and dry. And then I'm going to take the pins out, but first I'm going to try out my loop here, and going to do this in steps so that I can glue it a little bit at a time, and I'm not going to try to pin down the whole design and then do it. Otherwise, I think it would probably get messed up. So I'm going to do that first top loop, put some glue under the gold braid for that and pin it down, and then I'll do the same thing on both sides, and then I will let it dry so that I can continue with the design. But this will be the first part. It's getting that first loop started and making sure that it's symmetrical on either side. So there's the first loop. As you can see, and I'm using that first glued piece as the anchor to hold it down so that I was able to flip it around and make that circle. That's an easy way to do that. All right, and then I'm going to run that uh, piece of the braid down the side of the front, and then I'm going to make it come out a little bit and then make a loop going in the other way. So I let that dry and do the same thing on the other side so that I have the same design on both sides. So I'm running this forward on the places where it's just redundant material. I think you get the picture of how I'm using the glue and the pins and everything to make the swirls. And you can make, any kind of design that you want. And if you're questioning why I'm using glue instead of sewing it down, I just felt that I could position it better this way. I didn't want to try to pin it all down and then sew it. And sewing to me too might have shown more with the stitches on the blue material, and the glue just really works really well. It does for me anyway. Some people might not like it, and you can do it any way you want. You could use that gold thread like I used on the top part, but when you're doing these swirls and everything, Felt like the glue would work better. So that's with that top piece curled under on both sides, and I'm pinning it down, and then we'll let that dry. And I have this really heavy box. It's full of jewelry that I've found at different thrift shops and different places, and it's pretty heavy. So I'm gonna let that sit on top of it. Just make sure you don't have any glue on the top of the braid. All right, so now that that's glued down, we're gonna attach two pieces, a short piece and a longer piece, up under the curve of that bottom part that we just finished. And then those will be the two pieces that will curl up on either side. And we're going to do that on both the left and the right. So I'm just putting a little dab of glue on the tips and sticking it up as far as I can into the um, curve of that so that it looks like it's not separated. I mean, you can kind of tell. So that's how it looks after it dried. And now we're ready to start curling those pieces up into loops. And that's how we're going to complete the look for the bodice. And it just takes time. You just have to curl those, put the pins in, and go in and put your glue a little bit at a time. And, even after I finished everything, gluing it, I found some little places where it wasn't secure, and I could go in and put a little dab of glue there too, and didn't have to worry about, trying to do everything at one time. And so like on these bottom loops, I glued the loop part at the bottom first before I did the curve in, and that helped me to hold it in place. It's just hard to make that loop all at one time and then try to glue it. So I got those bottom pieces glued, and then I'm going to do the same thing with those smaller loops up at the top. So I've got the top ones looped there and then the bottom ones looped. And so I'm just letting that dry. The glue is right on the curve of the bottom. So that's secure now, and I can take the braid and fold it around without worrying about it coming out of shape and put another pin in it. And then I can glue that part down. So this is an interesting way to do trim. You can use this method on other things than a Snow White costume, of course. And it would be pretty to do like on sleeves if you wanted to do like an epaulette on a more formal uniform type costume for say a boy doll or even a girl doll. But that would be pretty on that. Maybe even like a Christmas type decoration. So there's all of our loops. Let those dry, and there's a few little places that like those ends that I'm going to have to go in and put more glue on and make use of your pins or heavy objects to sit on it as long as you don't glue the heavy object to it when you're doing it. So this ended up, I think, looking pretty neat. It's not the traditional Snow White costume, but we kind of broke away with that when we did the flowers on the skirt. And you'll see a lot of different costumes, especially when you look at cosplay. And she has a very plain costume, and I wanted to do a couple of things to make it a little bit more decorative. And that's one of them, the gold braid. So now I had taken the hands off of my doll, so it's easier to get the sleeves on. And the fit is really nice. So now we're going to put the ribbon on the sleeve, and this is another design element that I wanted to give her that's a little different from the traditional costume, and I think it will still give you that illusion. So I'm getting those ribbons that I glued, the red on top of the blue, and I'm trimming off the ends because I want to make sure they're all the same size. I have 10 of these little ribbons completed, and that will give me enough to do 5 on each sleeve. So we're going to have the illusion of the red slash in the sleeve, but with a different design element. And what I'm going to do is glue it into that seam at the very top and then fold it under so that it looks poofy. Fold that end up and glue that underneath to the bottom of the sleeve. All right. Stay with me. I know this sounds a little crazy. So we're going to put the glue right smack in that seam right there using my little pointy tool, still using my E6000. And then we're going to take the ribbon and stick it right down into that seam. And I want to do this so that the ribbon is really pointed straight up, pressed more against the darker blue than the lighter blue because I want it to, when I pull it down, to be poofy. I don't want it to lay flat against the light blue of the sleeve. Okay. And if you have to, you can stick pins in it. This glue dries so fast that for some of these, I just sat there and held it for a little while. I also made use of the paper towel on her head and stuck some pins in there to help hold the strips down while I'm letting them dry. So make use of whatever. And I'm only putting like I said, the 5 on it, and that's on the top of the sleeve because you really couldn't see underneath the sleeve anyway. And once you put 5 on, that pretty much covers up what you're able to see of the sleeve with her arms down. So I started with the middle one in the top, and then I put 2 on each side. I let those dry. I did the other side off camera to save time. And so you can see we're going to just pull those down and they'll be nice and poofy and they'll look pretty cool, I think. Now at this point you may need to trim them. They're not all going to be the same length because they're going to be different lengths from the shoulder seam to the edge of the sleeve. So I started off with them all the same size just to make sure that I had everything at the potential to be the same length. And then you may need to trim them a little bit as you put them on. And I'm folding up about 1/4 of an inch, and you can put pins in that to hold that down also. And then you just want to keep folding under, trying to make sure that the poofiness is equal between the ribbons. One's not more poofy than another, in other words, and that you're getting it glued down right on the edge of the sleeve. Now those last two are going to be a little bit shorter because they're closer to the body. So just trim accordingly. All right, so I did that on both sleeves, and there you have it. There's the bodice with the poofy sleeves, and now we're going to put the skirt on and get a look at the complete dress. There she is. I'm going to stick her up on the stand, and I'm going to make a picture of her with my camera so that you can get a look at her, at the dress as a whole. So I think that it turned out pretty nice. And it gives the illusion of the Snow White look without it being exactly the same as the costume that Disney created. And it's a little fancier. Okay, so here's a picture that I made with her in the stand, and you can see the thing is she's a little bit taller, longer looking than a regular person would be, so it's a little bit longer skirt than the picture from Disney. So what's coming up next? We got to do some shoes for Snow White, and we're going to fix her hair and put that traditional red ribbon in, and then we'll be complete. So please subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks and bye.